guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Melissa. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Today's Monday, so means it's a new true crime story. If you are new here, the whole month of November I'll be talking about solved cases, and on Friday I talk about missing children. Yeah, so let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about Susan Galvin. It took 52 years um to solve this case, and I think it's one of the oldest case that Seattle had at the time of the solving. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Let me take my glasses off. Just because I don't want nobody to bother the glare. Well, you know what? I'm gonna keep them on just because I feel more comfortable with them on. But if it bothers you or the glare bothers you, let me know in the comments. I know some people. I know I've seen other YouTubers that wear glasses and the glare bothers the people that are watching it. To me, it's not mine because I do wear glasses, but I just feel more comfortable with them. So yeah. So like I said, 52 years after Seattle woman was killed, um, police used family DNA and at least scientists to define the killer. On July 13th of 1969, Susan Galvin was found dead in a parking garage elevator at Seattle Center. The 20-year-old administrative employee at the Seattle Police Department who moved to Seattle from Spokane, Washington, a year earlier and been strangled and sexually assaulted. For more than 50 years, detectives have searched for a suspect in an unsolved murder, until a break in the case came a year ago, when Seattle police employed the same scientists and legal work that led to the arrest last April of the suspect in the notorious Golden State Killer case in California. Relying on the DNA evidence collected at the scene of the murder, detectives turned to a free genealogy website called GESMASH to look for MASH's database of volunteer submissions. What they learned through an extra links, further research, and the creation of a family tree allowed them to zeroes in on a previous unknown suspect. On Tuesday, during the meeting at the SPD headquarters in downtown Seattle, Chief Cameron Beats, alongside homicide detective Ralph Notori, turned to Chris Galvin, a surviving brother of Susan, and said that after almost 50 years, the police were confident that they had defined Susan's killer. "We never gave up," Beth said. In Norton, a 24-year-old member of the department with 18 as homicide detective, said he was amazed at every turn by the evidence collection investigation through the years, and finally technology that allowed he and fellow detectives and scientists to solve the case. The fact that we're here today and to be able to talk about what we could have do with the forensic evidence that was collected 51 years ago is understanding to me, Nolan said. Unlike the Golden State Killer case, in which 73-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo was identified and arrested as the suspect behind multiple killings and rapes across California, which I'm thinking I haven't talked about him, but when I go back to the circle all the way back to serial killers, I think he's in my list, and I cannot wait for y'all to hear the story, because the story is just, to me, it's like, wow. Seattle police won't be bringing anyone in alive. Frank E., which I'm not even going to try to say his name because he doesn't even deserve it for me to try, so I'm just going to. The newly discovered killer in the Galvin case died in 1987. According to police, Frank grew up in Seattle, Ballard neighborhood, and graduated from Pacific School in 1959. He served a stint in the USA Army in the early 1960s and was 26 years old and married, father of one, living in the Seattle area at the time of Galvin's murder. Frank worked general labor and security jobs and was known to visit Seattle Center during his leisure time. The sprawling event center, built for the 1962 World Fair and home to the iconic Space Needle, was a bar-going hub of activity. Susan was a civilian records clerk at the Public Safety Building in downtown Seattle. She was one of us, Norton said Tuesday, retelling of her SPD serial number. She lived in the Lower Queen Anne neighborhood, adjacent to the Seattle Center, and was also known to spend her off time there. After failing to show up to work at midnight to 8 a.m. Graveyard shift on July 10th of 1967, Galvin was reported missing, and investigation into her whereabouts began on July 12th. On the evening of July 13th, 1967, Susan's body was found by an attendant in Seattle Center parking garage at 30 Mercy Street, the garage which had been closed for several days. Provide access to the elevator walkway above the street, which Galvin reportedly used to get into the bus she took to work. The crime scene was preceded using techniques available at the time. Fingerprints were lifted from the elevator garage area. Autopsy evidence samples were collected, and Susan's clothing was entered into a department evidence files. Homicide detective Archie Port, David Grayson, Henry Acton, and Willing Sands began an investigation which lasts well into the next decade. Frank discovered from his first wife in 1971 divorced from his first wife in 1971 and was arrested for legacy that year and sentenced to 9 months in jail. He remarried in the mid 70s and lived at the various times and locations around Seattle, including South Park, West Seattle, White Center, Burden Sea Take, and Federal Way. He was living in Federal Way when he died in April of 1987 from complication related to diabetes, police said. DNA evidence was the first used to gain a conviction in the United States in 1987's rape case in Florida, and it ushered in a new era of police procedures in which samples were collected from suspects used against them in court. The FBI established a database of the DNA profile in the 1990s to be used to help determine whether convictions felony could be tied to other crimes. Seattle homicide detectives reviewed that Galvin case in 2002 and submitted items associated with the victims from the crime scene to the Washington State Parole Criminal Laboratory for DNA analysis, and scientist Lisa Collins was able to recover DNA from the semen on Susan's underwear, but when the profile was searched, the FBI combination DNA index not match was located. Norton began re-investigating the case in October 2016. At one point, he even tracked down a man who worked as a clown in Seattle Center during the time of Susan's murder. Witnesses told original case detectives that Susan was seen talking to a clown on the afternoon of July 9th. The man was interviewed by police in 1967 but released. In November 2016, Northern re-interviewed the man and obtained search warrant to collect a DNA sample. Back at the WSPCL, the DNA failed to match the recovery from Susan, and the man was cleared as a suspect. In July 2018, the suspect DNA from Susan's clothing was submitted to a stain base, and DNA technology company solved your toughest case fast. Reads a tagline, a company web page porting service called Snapshot, which includes tools such as genealogy, which helps define a suspect by matching their DNA to one or more family members. The suspect profile was reformed and entered into the GA Match, the public genealogy website. Perron Genealogy CC Moore then conducted a genealogy analysis as of the result from GED Match and located insert links to descent cousins to the offender profile. Additional ancestral research led to the studying of a family tree associated with the suspect, and Frank emerged as SPD main person of interest from the analysis. It was determined that Frank still had offspring living in the area. In January, Norton contacted relatives of Frank and received contents to collect the DNA samples from the person, which was then submitted to Frank's for competition to suspect profile. Norton stressed on Tuesday that the Frank family had been nothing but corrupted. The family of Frank had not done anything wrong, and therefore I would consider them preheritable victims of the whole accident, Norton said. Around the same time, in January, Rachel Force, a late print examiner with the SPD, now had a name to check on, and she dug into an old evidence file to find prints recovered from inside the elevator in which Susan was murdered. She was able to match a palm print recovered from the elevator control panel and left during intentional crime scenes, pursuant to those taken from Frank in 1971 when he was arrested for legacy, SBD said. With the family tree evidence and now the print match, Norton had what he needed to get a search warrant to exhume the remains of Frank at a cemetery in King County. On February 26, SPD homicide detective CSI detectives, Frank's SPCL scientists, and the forensic anthropology from King County Medical Examiner Office collected the DNA sample from Frank remains 32 years after he was buried and nearly 52 years after the death of Susan. The sample were submitted to Botanyology, a private DNA testing and genealogy research lab in London, and last month scientists there extracted the DNA profile. The profile was submitted to the WCPCL on April 12th, and it was confirmed that the DNA recovered from Susan matched the DNA of Frank. A story last April about the genealogy technique used to define Delangelo, the alleged California serial killer. The Washington Post report in how familiar DNA research were on the fringing of forensic science. Ancestry DNA boosts more than 10 million people in database to provide people with deeply meaningful insights about who they are and where they came from. Other popular sites include MyHeritage, around 2 million, and 23andMe, around 9 million. And while police and detectives are chomping at the bit to put the data in science to use to catch criminals, others, according to the Post, would rather not see widespread adoption for the technique for fear of turning us all into potential informants. You are allowed that low quality potential evidence to start being searched in these unregulated databases. Stephen Mercy, a former public defender who helped pass a ban on familiar search in Maryland, told the Post, "You're casting a wide net of suspicions over many, many people." In 2015, Wire report and story titled "Your Relative's DNA Could Turn You into a Suspect" that highly publicized success stories and observed that the fact that the science isn't foolproof. Research look for DNA profiles that are similar to prosecutors, but by no means intentional weird report calling the screenshot approach that yields many failures leads in for limited benefit. GEG Match, the website used by Seattle detective, provides DNA and genealogy and analyzed tools from mature and professional research and genealogies according to an annotation of his Bits Bar Bones homepage. It states in the terms of service and privacy policy. The DNA and genealogy research by its very nature requires that share information because of that the user participating in the sites agreed that the information will be shared with other users. For the most part, law enforcement has used this website, GED Match, for all these cases, and GED Match does not keep it a secret that they are cooperating with law enforcement, Northern said Tuesday, refreshing other recent crack cold cases. Now, there are other genealogy websites that have not made it a secret that they are not comparing with law enforcement, so that someone else veto. Norton said that the techniques is not slam dunk. Pieces have to fall into places regarding the suspect DNA profile, and there has not to be the bare minimum of DNA samples. There are also a good deal of cost and time associated with process. Hopefully, things are going to get easier as technology advances like it always does, right? He said. A story in the New Republic after Delangelo arrest in California stated that the case underscores how Americans may not realize how new technology can be used against them. Do you realize, for example, that when you upload your DNA, you're potentially becoming a genetic informant on the rest of your family? I have stuff to say about that, but we'll just come back to that. Elizabeth John, USA Davis Law professor who studies the Fourth Amendment technology, told the magazine, It all has the potential to become a database pitting the public value privacy against the public desire to catch a killer. For the family of Susan, finding out today that there is finally a suspect tied to the death of the young woman in Seattle so many years ago only provides part of the answer. Susan was the oldest of 8 children when she left Spokane in 1966 and settled from her brother Larry, provided by SPD the 53 years and has been the passing of their mother, father, and sister Arlene. The loss was felt mostly by her mother, who did her best to keep us in her. It would be hard for her to lose another child. Larry wrote, for her to the question was not necessarily who, but why. We children were young and we listened. We found our own ways to cope. As the years passed, we scattered to the winds. While acknowledging that the intensity of Detective Nora in the Seattle Police Department was most appreciated, Galvin thanked them for his sense of closure. But while science and DNA data and police work have combined to provide one missing piece of the puzzle, technology will be hard pressed to solve the remaining mystery. 52 years later, we learn that who, but still have not clear understanding as to why. The victim's brother wrote, "They will always be that lingering question." And that is the story of Susan. And I hope now she is resting in peace, even though he died before we even caught him. But so I do not have. I always wanted to do. Um, Wanted to find more about my background. If you don't know me, I'm Dominican, and I have Afro Latina in me, but I know that I have more than that in me. Um, and I know that a lot of people do not feel comfortable with putting their DNA in the system, like Ancestry or Heritage Kit or 23andMe, and I understand because of privacy. Um, I don't understand why they're referring it. If you put your DNA, you're coming an agent of your family. I feel like there's so many cases that are not solved that need to be solved, and not just for us, the public, but mostly for these families. Imagine going 52 years not knowing who killed your sister, and or not just even your sister, but any family member, and you walk every single day and you look at people different. Did they do it? Was it that person? Was it he? You just never know, and you don't find that peace that you need. You don't find that closure that you need because you don't know who did it and if they're still living. And not knowing the the who and the why. And like her brother said, we finally know the why. I mean the who, but we still don't know the why because he's not here to say why. And I don't think any family member that lost somebody um, in this type of way would ever find closure. Um, I'm the type of person that I do believe a lot in the spirit world, and I believe that if you die and if you don't die a peaceful death, your soul is not gonna rest. So I feel like once these, they finally, the family of the victim find answers of who did it and why they did it. I feel like the the vic the the deceased have found some type of peace. Meaning like imagine just Susan not being able to rest, even though her parents were there with her on the other side of the world, but her brother was still trying to figure it out. Was she ever resting? I don't think so. And I think once you find, or your living family members find who did it, whether their person is dead or alive, I think that person feels peace. I've heard it before. I've looked it up so many times, but I've always heard that when a soul dies a tragic death, they don't rest in peace because they're so confused and they don't know what happened. And I think that comes with every victim that dies like this, like whether it was a gunshot or whether they strangled you, whatever the case, however you die, your soul, I don't think your soul will rest in peace, especially if they have not been caught and they're still doing it. And I know that now that we know who did it, we may not know why he did it, but we know who did it. I think now she can rest in peace and be happy in the other life with her family, and just thank God that now she could, and her brother's happy. Will she ever find closure because she's gone? I don't think so. I don't think you could ever find closure when you lose someone, especially when you lose someone in this type of way. But I'm so glad that after 52 years we know, guys. If you um, if you know someone or some, that's trying to look for answers, go and go subscribe, go put your DNA, because you never know. You never know. You may help a family. You're not tattling in your family. If your family did something bad and they think they're about to get away with it, they're really wrong. So go get your DNA, put in the system. It's nothing crazy. It's very easy. It's a few steps. And yeah, I will see y'all Friday with the new case.